Emma Rodriguez stood at the front of her American history class at Riverside High School, her hands trembling slightly as she held her presentation notes. At 17, she had her mother's same steel-gray eyes and quiet determination, though most of her classmates never looked close enough to notice. "My hero is my mom, Commander Sarah Rodriguez," Emma began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "She served as a Navy SEAL for 15 years before retiring last year." The snickers started immediately. "Yeah, right," Brandon Walker called out from the back row, not even bothering to whisper. "Girls can't be SEALs." Emma's jaw tightened. "Actually, women have been allowed to serve in SEAL teams since 2016, and my mom was one of the first to complete the training." More laughter rippled through the classroom. Madison Chen, one of the popular girls, didn't even look up from her phone. "My dad's in the military and he says there's never been a female SEAL. You're making it up." "That's enough," Mrs. Patterson, the teacher, said weakly, but she didn't sound convinced either. Her skeptical expression made Emma's heart sink. Emma pushed forward, showing photos on the projector. There was her mom in uniform standing with her unit, her mom receiving a medal, her mom's official Navy portrait. But the damage was done. The whispers continued throughout her entire presentation. After class, Emma gathered her materials with shaking hands. She'd been so proud of her mother's service, so excited to share her story. Now she felt foolish for even trying. "Hey, Emma," Madison said, walking past with her group of friends. "Maybe next time pick a real hero instead of making up stories. It's kind of pathetic." Emma bit her lip, refusing to cry in front of them. She'd learned that from her mom: never let them see you break. The mockery didn't stop there. By lunchtime, it had spread throughout the school. Someone had created a meme using one of Emma's presentation photos, captioning it "Stolen Valor Barbie." It was being shared across social media, and the comments were cruel. "Your mom probably works at the Navy office or something, and you just made up the rest," Tyler Morrison said when Emma sat down in the cafeteria. He was the star quarterback and someone she'd considered a friend. "My uncle's a Marine, and he says female SEALs are just a diversity thing. They don't actually do real missions." Emma's appetite vanished. She pushed her tray away. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Just admit you lied," Madison chimed in from the next table. "It's embarrassing watching you dig yourself deeper." That afternoon, Emma was called to the principal's office. Principal Hendricks sat behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson was there too, along with the school counselor, Ms. Freeman. "Emma, we need to talk about your presentation," Principal Hendricks began. "Several students and even some parents have expressed concerns." "Concerns about what?" Emma asked, though she knew exactly where this was going. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "About the accuracy of your claims regarding your mother's military service. We take academic integrity very seriously here. If you embellished certain details—" "I didn't embellish anything," Emma interrupted, her voice rising. "Everything I said was true. My mom is a Navy SEAL. She's retired now." Principal Hendricks exchanged glances with the teacher. "Emma, I understand wanting to make your mother's service sound more impressive, but making false claims about military service is actually a crime. It's called stolen valor." The irony wasn't lost on Emma. She was being accused of the very thing she'd never do: disrespecting military service. "I have her service records at home," Emma said desperately. "I can bring them in. I can have her come to school and tell you herself." Ms. Freeman, the counselor, spoke gently. "Emma, if you're having trouble at home, if you need attention—" "Are you serious right now?" Emma stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need attention. I need you to believe me. My mother risked her life for this country, and you're all calling me a liar." "Lower your voice, young lady," Principal Hendricks said sternly. "We're trying to help you. This kind of behavior, combined with these false claims, suggests you might be going through something. We're concerned about you." Emma felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The only thing I'm going through is being surrounded by people who don't know the first thing about honor or truth. She grabbed her backpack and walked out before they could stop her. Behind her, she heard Principal Hendricks say something about calling her mother in for a conference. Good, Emma thought, let them call her, then they'll see. But as she walked through the hallways, past the staring students and whispered comments, a small voice in the back of her mind wondered if it would even matter. Her mom had fought so hard to prove herself in the SEALs. She'd faced discrimination, doubt, and impossible standards. And now, even after everything she'd accomplished, people still didn't believe she existed. Emma pulled out her phone and texted her mom, "Can you come to school tomorrow? Please, I need you." The response came quickly, "On my way home from physical therapy. What's wrong?" Emma didn't know how to explain it all in a text. How did you tell your hero that people thought you'd made her up? "Just come tomorrow," she typed. "I'll explain everything tonight." As Emma pushed through the school's front doors into the afternoon sun, she heard Brandon's voice carry across the parking lot. "There goes the girl whose imaginary mom is a superhero." The laughter that followed made Emma's decision for her. Tomorrow, her mother would come to school, and everyone who doubted, mocked, and humiliated her would learn exactly what a Navy SEAL looked like. Sarah Rodriguez arrived home that evening to find her daughter sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by printed documents and photographs. Even after a grueling physical therapy session for her injured knee, a souvenir from her last deployment, Sarah could tell something was seriously wrong. Emma's eyes were red, and she had that same stubborn set to her jaw that Sarah recognized from looking in the mirror. "Talk to me, Mija," Sarah said, sitting down across from her daughter. She was still in her casual workout clothes, her short dark hair damp with sweat. Emma explained everything: the presentation, the mockery, the principal's accusation. With each word, Sarah's expression grew harder, her jaw tighter, but she didn't interrupt. She'd learned patience in the SEALs, the ability to gather all intelligence before making a move. When Emma finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "You know this isn't the first time I've had to prove myself," she finally said. "It won't be the last." "But it's not fair, Mom. You earned your trident, you served, you sacrificed, and they're acting like women like you don't even exist." Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "The world is full of people who can't imagine what they've never seen. Female SEALs are rare. There aren't many of us. Some people find it easier to deny our existence than to expand their understanding of what's possible. So we just let them think I'm a liar." "No," Sarah said, a slight smile crossing her face. "Tomorrow I'll come to your school, I'll bring documentation, and we'll educate some people." That night, Sarah pulled out her Navy records, her awards, and her official documentation. She also made a few phone calls. If the school wanted proof, she'd give them more than they bargained for. The next morning, Sarah dressed in her Navy service uniform, the one she'd worn to her retirement ceremony just 8 months ago. The ribbons on her chest told a story of courage and service: the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, and many others. She pinned her SEAL trident, the distinctive eagle clutching an anchor, trident, and flintlock pistol, over her left breast pocket. Emma watched her mother prepare, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. "You don't have to wear your uniform, Mom. I just wanted you to talk to them." Sarah adjusted her cover and looked at her daughter. "When people question your integrity, you show them who you are without apology. Besides, this uniform isn't for them. It's for you, and for every young woman who needs to know that there are no limits to what she can achieve." They arrived at Riverside High at 9:30 a.m. Sarah had requested a meeting with Principal Hendricks, which he'd granted, probably expecting a tearful parent making excuses for her daughter's lies. What he got instead was a decorated Navy SEAL commander walking through his halls with the bearing of someone who'd led troops into combat. Students stopped and stared as Sarah passed. The uniform commanded immediate respect, even from those who'd mocked Emma the day before. Brandon Walker actually stepped back against his locker, his cocky expression faltering. In the principal's office, Principal Hendricks stood up quickly when Sarah entered. His eyes went immediately to the trident on her chest, then to the rows of ribbons. "Commander Rodriguez," he said, his tone completely different from how he'd spoken to Emma. "Thank you for coming in." "Principal Hendricks," Sarah said coolly, not offering her hand. "I understand you've accused my daughter of stolen valor and lying about my military service." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Well, we had concerns. Concerns that you could have easily verified before humiliating a student," Sarah interrupted. "I'm here to provide documentation, but first, I want to understand your process. When a student gives a presentation about their parent's career, do you always assume they're lying, or only when the career doesn't fit your preconceptions?" Mrs. Patterson, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. "Commander, with all due respect, female Navy SEALs are extremely rare. We'd never heard of." "Your lack of knowledge doesn't negate my existence," Sarah said sharply. "I've provided my DD-214, my service record, and letters of commendation from 3 flag officers. I also took the liberty of inviting someone else to this meeting." As if on cue, there was a knock on the door. Principal Hendricks opened it to reveal a man in his 50s wearing a Navy uniform with the stars of a rear admiral. "Admiral Pritchard," the principal stammered. We didn't know you were coming." "Commander Rodriguez served under me for 6 years," Admiral Pritchard said, entering the room. "When she told me her daughter was being called a liar for honoring her mother's service, I cleared my schedule. I wanted to be here personally to verify that Sarah Rodriguez is not only a Navy SEAL, but one of the finest warriors I've ever had the privilege to command." The room fell silent. Principal Hendricks looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Sarah pulled out a folder. "Here's my complete service record, my graduation certificate from Bud S., my Trident certification, documentation of my deployments, photos from missions, the ones that aren't classified anyway, letters from my commanding officers, and a copy of the Navy Times article written about me and the other early female SEAL candidates." She placed each document on Principal Hendricks's desk with deliberate precision. "My daughter told the truth, every single word, and instead of celebrating a student who honored her parents' service, you chose to doubt, question, and humiliate her. That says far more about this institution than it does about Emma." Mrs. Patterson had gone pale. We apologize. We should have verified before making assumptions." "Yes, you should have," Admiral Pritchard agreed. "But the damage has been done. This young lady's reputation has been damaged. She's been mocked by her peers and doubted by her educators. The question now is, what are you going to do to make this right?" Principal Hendricks looked down at the documents, then back at Sarah and the Admiral. "We'll issue a formal apology to Emma. We'll address the student body about what happened. We'll make sure everyone knows." "That's a start," Sarah said. "But I think there's more to be done here. My daughter gave an educational presentation about military service and sacrifice. Perhaps the school should hear the complete presentation, this time with proper context. And perhaps some of your students and staff need education about the realities of modern military service and the contributions of women in combat roles." Emma, who'd been sitting quietly, finally spoke up. "I just want people to know the truth, Mom." Sarah put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "They will, Mija, they will." Admiral Pritchard smiled. "Commander Rodriguez, would you be willing to give an assembly presentation to the school? I think these students could benefit from hearing directly from a Navy SEAL about what it really takes to serve." "It would be my honor, sir," Sarah replied. As they left the principal's office, word had already spread through the school. Students lined the hallways, this time not mocking but watching with newfound respect and more than a little shame. The gymnasium at Riverside High had never been so quiet. Nearly 800 students sat in the bleachers, along with faculty members, several parents, and a handful of local veterans who'd heard about the assembly and asked to attend. At the center of the polished floor stood a podium with a microphone, and next to it, a large projection screen. Principal Hendricks stepped to the microphone, his voice echoing slightly. "Students, faculty, and honored guests, thank you for gathering on short notice. Yesterday, a grave injustice occurred at our school. A student was mocked and disbelieved for sharing the truth about her mother's military service. Today, we correct that wrong." He paused, looking genuinely remorseful. "It's my privilege to introduce Rear Admiral James Pritchard, United States Navy, and Commander Sarah Rodriguez, retired Navy SEAL." The applause started slowly, then built. Sarah walked to the center of the gym floor with the confident stride of someone who'd carried 60-pound packs through desert heat and scaled cliffs in the dead of night. She didn't rush to the microphone. She let them see her, really see her, in her uniform with its ribbons and trident. Emma sat in the front row, her heart pounding. She'd seen her mother in uniform before, of course, but never like this. Never as a living rebuttal to every doubt and insult she'd endured. "Thank you, Principal Hendricks," Sarah began. "I'm going to start with a question. How many of you have heard of the Navy SEALs?" Nearly every hand went up. "Good. Now, how many of you knew that women could serve as Navy SEALs?" Only a few hands remained raised, mostly from students who'd actually listened to Emma's presentation. Sarah nodded. "That's what I expected, and that's exactly the problem. Not your lack of knowledge, you're students, you're here to learn. The problem is that we as a society often believe that what we don't see doesn't exist. If we've never heard of something, we assume it's not real. That assumption led to my daughter being humiliated for telling the truth." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her came to life with an image of a young Sarah in combat gear, face camouflaged, holding a rifle in what was clearly a desert environment. This photo was taken during my second deployment to Afghanistan in 2019. I was part of a special operations unit conducting night raids against high-value targets. On this particular mission, we were tasked with extracting 2 American journalists being held hostage by a Taliban cell. The gym was utterly silent now. Even the students who'd been slouching in the bleachers sat up straight. The mission required entering a compound through a ventilation system that larger operators couldn't fit through. It required gaining the trust of the female family members in the compound, who would never speak to male soldiers. It required precision, patience, and the same skills that every SEAL possesses, regardless of gender. She clicked to the next image, the 2 journalists being airlifted to safety. "We brought those journalists home alive. I'm telling you this not to brag, but to help you understand something important. Capability isn't determined by gender. It's determined by training, determination, and heart." Sarah began walking slowly as she talked, making eye contact with students throughout the gym. "Yes, I'm a woman. I'm also 5'6" and weighed 130 pounds when I went through SEAL training. The standards didn't change for me. I had to do the same mile swims in freezing water, the same hell week with no sleep, the same obstacle courses, the same everything as my male counterparts. Actually, if I'm honest, I had to do more, because I had to prove I belonged every single day." Madison Chen, who'd been one of Emma's harshest critics, looked down at her hands. "My daughter stood in front of her class and told the truth about my service. She was proud of me, as she has every right to be. And what happened? She was mocked. She was called a liar. She was accused of making up stories for attention." Sarah's voice grew harder. "Some of you created memes to humiliate her. Some of you laughed at her in the hallways. Some of you told her to her face that her mother, that I was a fraud." Brandon Walker slumped lower in his seat, his face red. "Here's what I want you to understand," Sarah continued. "When you mock someone for honoring their family's service, you dishonor everyone who has worn this uniform. When you refuse to believe that women can achieve extraordinary things, you limit not just women but all of humanity. And when you choose mockery over curiosity, insults over questions, you reveal your own character, not theirs. She let that sink in for a moment, then her expression softened slightly. But here's the other thing I want you to know. You're young. You're learning. We all make mistakes, especially when we're confronted with something that challenges our assumptions. The question is, what will you do now that you know the truth? Sarah clicked to another image, this one of her SEAL training class. She was the only woman among 30 men. I graduated Bud S in 2018. Of the original 140 candidates who started, only 23 of us finished. The attrition rate is about 75% for everyone, regardless of gender. It's designed to be nearly impossible because the missions we conduct require people who don't quit when things get hard. Tyler Morrison, the quarterback, raised his hand tentatively. Sarah nodded at him. "Ma'am, I said some things about female SEALs being just for diversity. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Sarah studied him for a moment. "Thank you for that. But I want you to think about why you said it. Where did that assumption come from? Was it from actual knowledge, or was it from bias? From the belief that women couldn't possibly meet the same standards as men?" Tyler thought about it. "Bias, ma'am, I'd never seen it, so I didn't think it was real." "Exactly," Sarah said. "And that's the lesson here. Just because you haven't seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are currently 9 female Navy SEALs on active duty. We're rare, not because women can't do it, but because it's an incredibly difficult path that few people of any gender are willing or able to pursue." She clicked through several more images, training exercises, missions with classified details obscured, and finally, her retirement ceremony where she was awarded her final commendations. "I served for 15 years. I lost friends in combat. I was wounded twice. You can see the Purple Hearts on my uniform. I missed birthdays, holidays, and years of my daughter's childhood because I was deployed. And I'd do it all again because I believed in the mission and I believed in serving something greater than myself." Admiral Pritchard stood and joined Sarah at the center of the floor. "I'd like to add something, if I may." Sarah stepped back and the Admiral addressed the students. "In my 30 years of service, I've commanded thousands of sailors. Commander Rodriguez ranks among the very best. Her gender has nothing to do with it. Her skill, courage, and dedication do. When she was under my command, she led missions that I can't discuss in detail due to their classified nature, but I can tell you this. She saved lives. American lives. Allied lives. And she did it with the same excellence we expect from every Navy SEAL." He turned to face Emma directly. "Young lady, you should be proud of your mother, and this school should be proud of you for having the courage to honor her service, even when people doubted you." Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but this time they were good tears. Around the gymnasium, students were clapping, not politely but genuinely. Some were standing. Principal Hendricks returned to the microphone. "Before we close, I want to address what happened. As a school, we failed Emma Rodriguez. We failed to verify the truth before allowing her to be humiliated. To Emma, please accept our sincerest apology." He looked out at the student body. "And to our students, this is a learning moment. Before you mock someone, ask questions. Before you doubt someone, seek understanding. And before you decide what's impossible, remember that there are people out there every day doing things you've never imagined." The assembly ended, but Sarah wasn't done. As students filed out of the gymnasium, Principal Hendricks approached her with a request she hadn't anticipated. "Commander Rodriguez, several students have asked if they could speak with you privately. Would you be willing to stay for a bit?" Sarah looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course," Sarah said. What followed was a series of conversations that revealed just how deep the impact of the assembly had gone. The first student to approach was Madison Chen, the girl who'd been particularly cruel to Emma. She came forward hesitantly, her eyes red from crying. Commander Rodriguez, I don't know how to apologize enough, to you or to Emma. I was the one who made the meme. I started spreading it around. Sarah didn't make it easy for her. Why did you do it? Madison struggled for words. I thought Emma was showing off, making up this big story to seem special. My dad's in the Air Force, and I've heard him talk about people who lie about military service, and I assumed that's what she was doing. You assumed, Sarah repeated. Based on what evidence? Based on nothing, Madison admitted, her voice breaking. Based on my own ignorance. I didn't know women could be SEALs, so I decided Emma must be lying. I'm so sorry. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Madison, your father serves his country, and that's honorable. But I suspect he'd be disappointed to know his daughter used what she'd learned about stolen valor to bully another student without checking the facts first. Madison nodded miserably. I know. I'm going to delete all the posts and tell everyone I was wrong. That's a start, Sarah said. But I want you to think about this experience. The next time you encounter something that doesn't fit your expectations, whether it's about military service or gender roles or anything else, what will you do differently? I'll ask questions before making judgments, Madison said. I'll research before I speak, and I'll remember that just because I haven't seen something doesn't mean it's not real. Good, Sarah said. Now go apologize to my daughter properly. Emma, who'd been standing nearby, stepped forward. The two girls looked at each other for a long moment, then Madison spoke. Emma, I was terrible to you. I humiliated you in front of the whole school. I made you feel like your mom's incredible service didn't matter. I'm so sorry. Emma took a deep breath. Forgiveness wasn't easy, especially after the pain Madison had caused. But she'd learned from her mother that holding onto anger only hurt yourself. I appreciate your apology, Emma said carefully. What you did really hurt. But I also understand that we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next. The two girls didn't hug or suddenly become best friends. That would have been unrealistic. But there was an understanding between them now, a foundation for something better. Next came Brandon Walker, the boy who'd started the mockery in class. He approached with his father, a stern-looking man in his 50s. Commander Rodriguez, I'm Eric Walker, the father said, extending his hand. My son has something he needs to say. Brandon looked uncomfortable, but his father's presence kept him honest. Ma'am, I was disrespectful in class. I said women couldn't be SEALs. I was wrong and I'm sorry. Sarah shook his hand firmly. Brandon, your apology is noted, but I want to understand something. Where did you learn that women couldn't serve in the SEALs? Brandon glanced at his father, then back at Sarah. I guess. I just never heard of it. And when I haven't heard of something, I kind of assumed it meant it wasn't real. That's lazy thinking, his father interjected sharply. And it's not how I raised you. Sarah held up a hand. Mr. Walker, I appreciate your concern, but let me address this directly. She turned to Brandon. Here's what I want you to take from this experience. When you encounter information that challenges what you think you know, you have two choices. You can dismiss it defensively, or you can get curious and learn something new. One of those choices makes you ignorant. The other makes you educated. Which do you want to be? Educated, ma'am, Brandon said quietly. Then prove it, Sarah said. Research military history. Learn about the women who have served in combat roles throughout American history. There have been female pilots since World War II, female soldiers in combat since the 1990s, and female Special Operations Forces since 2016. We've been here all along. You just weren't looking. Brandon nodded, and there was something different in his expression now. Genuine interest rather than defensive mockery. Throughout the day, more students came, some to apologize, some to ask questions, some just to say they'd been inspired by Sarah's story. One girl, a quiet freshman named Jessica, approached with tears in her eyes. Commander Rodriguez, I want to join the military someday, maybe even try for the SEALs, but everyone tells me girls can't do that stuff. Today, you showed me they're wrong. Sarah's stern expression softened completely. Jessica, the path won't be easy. You'll face doubt from others and from yourself. There will be days when you want to quit. But if you want it badly enough, and if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life, there's no reason you can't achieve it. How do I start? Jessica asked eagerly. Start by getting in the best shape of your life. Start by studying hard in school. SEALs need intelligence as much as physical strength. Start by learning to work with others because special operations is all about teamwork. And start by believing in yourself, even when others don't. Sarah pulled a card from her pocket, her contact information. Email me. I'll send you information about youth fitness programs, military preparedness, and what you need to know. And Jessica, don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. The girl clutched the card like it was made of gold. Thank you, ma'am. You've changed my life. As the afternoon wore on, even some of the teachers approached Sarah to apologize and ask questions. Mrs. Patterson, in particular, seemed deeply affected. Commander, I'm ashamed of how I handled Emma's presentation. I should have defended her. Instead, I let doubt creep in because I'd never encountered a female SEAL before. Mrs. Patterson, you teach American history, Sarah said. Use this as a teaching moment. There are countless stories of women in military service that don't get told. The WASPs who flew military aircraft in World War II, the nurses who served in combat zones, the female soldiers who have received silver stars and purple hearts. Tell those stories. Make sure future students know that American military history includes everyone who served. Mrs. Patterson nodded. I will, I promise you I will. By the time the school day ended, Sarah was exhausted, not from the physical demands, but from the emotional weight of the conversations. As she and Emma walked to their car, Emma slipped her hand into her mother's. Mom, you were amazing today. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. You were brave, First Mija. You stood up and told the truth even when people didn't want to hear it. That takes real courage. 3 weeks later, Emma walked into school with her head held high. The atmosphere had changed dramatically since the assembly. Students who'd once mocked her now nodded respectfully in the hallways. Teachers smiled at her. And the school itself had begun a series of educational programs about military service and the contributions of women in the armed forces. But the real change came in the form of an announcement during morning announcements. Principal Hendricks's voice crackled over the PA system. Students, I'm pleased to announce a new initiative at Riverside High. Thanks to Emma Rodriguez and her mother, Commander Sarah Rodriguez, we're establishing the Veterans Family Scholarship and the Military Awareness Program. Emma will be heading the student committee. Emma felt her cheeks flush as heads turned toward her in homeroom. But this time, the attention felt different, respectful, not mocking. The committee met after school that day. To Emma's surprise, both Madison and Brandon had signed up to join. So had Jessica, the freshman who wanted to become a SEAL, along with a dozen other students. I want to help, Madison said when they gathered in the library. I want to make up for what I did. I've been researching women in military service, and there are so many stories people don't know. We could create presentations, maybe bring in other veterans to speak. Tyler Morrison added, My cousin served in Iraq. He struggled since coming home. Maybe we could do something to support veterans dealing with PTSD or injuries. Emma listened to the ideas flowing around the table, feeling something shift inside her. What had started as humiliation and pain had transformed into purpose. These are all great ideas, Emma said, but I think we need to start with the basics. How many students here actually understand what different military branches do? How many know what veterans face when they come home? We need education first, then action. Over the following weeks, the committee worked tirelessly. They created displays in the school hallways featuring local veterans, not just the famous ones, but regular people who'd served. They organized a Veterans Day event that brought in speakers from different branches and different eras of service. They partnered with local veterans organizations to create care packages for deployed troops. Sarah attended many of these events, sometimes in uniform, sometimes in civilian clothes. She watched with pride as her daughter found her voice and her purpose. But more than that, she watched as an entire school community began to change its perspective. The most powerful moment came during the Veterans Day assembly. Emma had organized it all, the speakers, the music, the decorations. But she'd planned one surprise that even Sarah didn't know about. As the assembly concluded, Emma took the microphone. "Before we close, I want to share something personal. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this gym feeling humiliated and angry. I'd been mocked for honoring my mother's service. I'd been called a liar for telling the truth. It was one of the worst days of my life." The gymnasium was silent. Students who'd been there that day looked uncomfortable. "But something amazing happened," Emma continued. "My mom didn't just come here to prove I was telling the truth. She came here to teach us all something important about courage, perseverance, and the danger of assumptions. And because of that, this school has changed." She paused, looking out at the faces before her. "I've learned that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. That pain can become purpose, and that admitting you were wrong takes more courage than anything else." Emma gestured to the committee members standing along the side of the gym. "These students, some of whom mocked me 3 weeks ago, have worked incredibly hard on this program. They've learned about military service, about sacrifice, about the contributions of people they never knew existed. They've turned their ignorance into education and their mockery into respect." She saw Madison wipe tears from her eyes. Brandon stood a little straighter. "So I want to say thank you," Emma said. "Thank you to everyone who had the courage to admit they were wrong. Thank you to everyone who chose to learn instead of continuing to judge. And thank you, Mom, for showing us all what a true hero looks like." Sarah stood as the gymnasium erupted in applause. Emma came down from the podium and hugged her mother tightly. "I'm so proud of you," Sarah whispered in her daughter's ear. "Not because you got them to apologize, but because you turned something painful into something purposeful." That evening, as they drove home together, Emma was quiet, reflective. Sarah let the silence sit between them comfortably. Finally, Emma spoke. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything, Mija." "When you were going through SEAL training and people doubted you, how did you keep going?" Sarah thought about it carefully before answering. "I kept going because I knew the mission was bigger than me. I knew there would be girls like you and like Jessica watching to see if it was possible. I knew that every time I wanted to quit and didn't, I was proving something important, not just for myself but for everyone who would come af."